All right, go ahead.
I'm Penelope Jean Hayes, and this is Your Superior Self with Trey Downs.
Penelope, I just every time you do that, you've been on the show before. I love it. How are you? It's great to catch up. It's great to have you back on.
I'm
I know
good.
you're busy. How are you?
I am good. I mean, it's a good busy though, right? When you're following your dreams and finally at that place. I struggled for many years in my earlier life. So this is the time that I get to enjoy that. So it's a good busy. You
Sure.
know what you know what I mean by good busy, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's good to
Yeah.
be busy, especially after what we've been through. To be focused more on the positive and expansion and bringing more awareness to our work. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, but
Living the dream, literally though.
living the dream. We'll get into
Living
your
the dream.
story because it's very fascinating. I hear you're putting some stuff together for a documentary, though.
I am.
Can you
So
talk
some
about
of
that?
it, let me think of what I can tell you. So some of it's kind of a little bit top secret, actually, Trey. But I will tell you that I have a contact in the government, very high up, and I'm not even going to name the department because one a journalist does not give away one's sources. But we are with the information that has been coming through this connection. We are putting together a documentary that has to deal with the matter of consciousness. And this extrapolates into consciousness at all levels. And that would be consciousness on this planet from animals and plants. And I've got some interesting stories actually I want to get into. Human consciousness, what does that mean? To define consciousness is actually rather elusive because we can think of is that to be awake? Is that, what does that mean for if you're, let's say, if you're in the hospital and you're unconscious? So is that the definition of consciousness? Is this an ability to know right from wrong? Is consciousness a connection to a larger source? Does consciousness have levels to it? So there's consciousness, almost like a being of consciousness or a network of consciousness or a noun of consciousness. But then there's the idea of how conscious are you? Levels within that consciousness. And we're looking at off planet consciousness, so consciousness in space, extraterrestrial consciousness. And there's a lot of information that has actually been disclosed to the public by our government in which the public has simply missed. And it's
Really?
it's interesting because we keep waiting for alien disclosure. However, it's already happened in a lot of ways, and it will be happening again from June forward of this year.
We missed it. What did we miss? I don't know. I guess I missed it too.
Well, many things. I mean, there was a very quite famous at the time, I believe it was 1952, that there were ET crafts that hovered over our nation's capital,
Hmm.
over the Capitol building, quite large crafts, and they were there for some time. They were seen on all of the radar by the Air Force, Navy. It was indisputable, actually, and there was nothing that we could do about it. So this presence was there. These physical crafts were there, and the message was sort of, that there was nothing we could do about it. It was a presence that was um, there was just simply nothing that our government could do about that.
Hmm.
And disclosure has been in many other ways. There was the New York Times did a huge expose in 2017 where they had a series of front page stories about alien disclosure and various people very high up in our government who were interviewed and who, said what they knew. And so that was another disclosure. And there was a press briefing. I forget what year it was. I think it might have been 2008 or something like that. And it was to the National Press Club, and Dr. Stephen Greer led that. And at that time, that was also a disclosure. So you almost could say that disclosure has been happening in drips. And yet, I think we're so desensitized in terms of the entertainment that we're used to getting that, when real disclosure happens, that we almost don't notice because we're so desensitized to all of that. So it's really interesting. There's many layers to it.
Yeah, no. It's funny you talk about layers. I was just thinking about this today, actually, how consciousness has layers, like, or I think it does. Like, hypothesize that it does because I feel like you as you grow as a person, as you develop, as you um, learn more, you obtain different levels of consciousness, which allows you to access different types of data.
Hmm.
I can attest to this just through my development, through my journey of my curiosity. That's what it started. Everything for me is just curiosity about near death experiences, and it's taken me down so many different rabbit holes. But it seems like the more that you progress, the more that you grow, develop yourself, you change your brain synaptic connections, like you change the consciousness that you're accessing. And
You
you,
said that so well.
yeah, I mean, you just start having these different ideas, these aha moments, more of
Well,
those.
and there's actually science behind it. So it's not so esoteric or even spiritual. There's science behind it. And they also have been, and I'm saying they in the context of our government, has been studying this and have had programs that went completely underground at one point, actually, but programs studying this, psychic abilities, remote viewing, um, different abilities of the mind, and they have gotten extremely far with understanding this. So you may not know how well you actually just described that. So I can say that from the research that I've been doing through the Viralenology Institute and looking at these different, what are sources that are actually available, have been disclosed in various ways. They've been disclosed to the public, and they're data that's actually there and available. Just most people don't know where to look. But one of the things is that consciousness, you can think of it as, it's a network. And through various modalities, we can open up to consciousness or greater consciousness or higher consciousness in different ways. And that could be through meditation, is one example that I think a lot of us could be familiar with, even sitting in nature, various things like that. But when you're talking about, I think you said brain synapses, but the science behind consciousness would be the same science behind psychic abilities. And that is that we need to tune down the left hemisphere of our brain in order for the right hemisphere of the brain to access the 95% of the brain that we're not using. So we're only using 5% of our brain. And the left side of the brain is responsible for analytical thinking. So things come into, stimuli comes into our, in this case, our mind, which is different than consciousness, but comes into our mind, and the left side of the brain gets it first. And it basically says, what are we going to let the right side of the brain know? What are we going to let through? And nothing will get through to the right side of the brain unless it passes that filter system of
Mhm.
the left side of the brain. And that would say, oh, that's impossible, whatever that thing is, near death experience or psychic abilities or whatever it is, the next possibility of science and cosmology and quantum theory, that left side might say, that's impossible. And that information will never be possible for you, because then your right side of the brain cannot put it through all of its abilities to access. Now here's where consciousness comes in, access collective consciousness, because that's really what it's doing. So it can tap into now those experiences outside of the body. It can tap into those experiences of remote viewing something in another place and even another time, by the way. So these abilities are abilities that we have, that our consciousness has, when it can connect to higher consciousness, when it can and is allowed to connect to the whole of what is available to us within this network of consciousness. And so what they do, what they have done in these studies, and these are programs in our government, underground programs going on for decades. What they do is they quite easily actually tune down the left side of the brain, distract the left hemisphere of the brain. And we do that all the time. That can be done through hypnosis. It can be done through listening to different tapes. Think of ocean waves. There's built-in patterns and vibrations of hertz. So it's like a beat per second, a beat per minute. It's a rhythm, it's a pattern that can help you tune. And when you tune, just to put it in very simple terms, you can tune your left side of the brain to basically be quiet for a while. and kind of go dormant for a while, therefore letting in suggestion. And if the suggestion was, um, the suggestion could be, I'm beautiful, or the suggestion could be, I'm fat, or the suggestion could be, this thing is possible, or your dream is possible. Whatever that suggestion is, if it's allowed to get through that analytical side of the brain and pass through to the right side of the brain, now the magic starts happening and we can tap into a collective consciousness, which
Mm.
opens up just a world of things.
Sure. No, Stan Groff, he did a lot of research in the early days of LSD, and then he uh, started the holotropic breath work, which accesses pretty much the same states that you would not. I wouldn't say the same, but some of the consciousness, collective consciousness states that you would with LSD. But he came up with like, how did he term it? Like coex or something like these community, not community, but like collective emotions. Like there's a collective, sadness, collective happiness, collective sorrow, collective
Yes.
excitement, whatever, all of that stuff, right? And we project it out through our feelings, our emotions. Like you think that you work with energy, you project this
Yes.
feeling out, and energy goes out into the universe, and it doesn't like this, it doesn't disappear. It's out there forever. Everything is in the akashic field for forever. It's information
Mhm.
that's how the system learns. That's how the system adapts. That's how it evolves. And they would experience like some of the data that I was reading is like some of these people would experience like the collective suffering and go through these LSD trips and feel that and just be
Oh, there's
overwhelmed.
many studies. And LSD, there's also been other studies that would say to not have anything brain altering in terms of drugs because you're dumbing down some of the abilities of the brain and therefore the consciousness. So there are different modalities. What might work for one research group may be not used in another, but there is a lot of research on that. And in the study of viralenology, which is the study of contagious energy, viral energy, that's what I work on. We look at how all energy is contagious. So the matter of being contagious is simply just a property of energy. So all energy is contagious and it's contagious osmotically. So that would be a passive experience. Osmosis, the process by which molecules move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration through a semi-permeable membrane, which is us, until the concentrations are equal on both sides. So this is actually just a fact of science. So when we know that, by the way, it's important to know that the higher concentration always wins. The higher concentration always wins. So you start thinking, well, wait a minute, what am I marinating in? What is around me in the immediate environment? Because while energy also works from a great distance, we can get into things like, twin particles, uh, we can get into a lot of quantum theory, but in terms of what is tangible to us, what is all around us, energy is contagious. And it's not only contagious on a personal level and interpersonal level, it's contagious around the globe in large pockets. So you think of like a tumor of energy. Just imagine if you could look at the globe and you could actually see tumors of negative, actually, the better word is heavy energy or light energy. And those are in different places. So, heavy energy, you can think of where they've had war for generation after generation, maybe the Middle East. You could think of heavy energy where there's an industry that's been, polluting into the environment with impunity for a long period of time. You don't get away with that energetically. Energy can't lie, energy will always tell the story. So there are actually collected pockets of energy that sit like tumors in different, places and societies and different pockets around the world. And they are now contagious. So people that live in that environment, they might feel, you could go to a certain city and feel like it's vibration. You could go to Hawaii and most people experience something very exhilarating with energy in Hawaii. So this is tangible and we know it is because we've all experienced it on some level.
Yeah, you think about all the amazing memories like you get in Hawaii, like all the proposals, all the family vacations, all the great stuff, and then you're around it, and then it's like you just get sucked into the energy, and then you go to places that are just you just feel bad, like just areas that you can feel bad things have happened, like it just like you said, contagious.
Mhm.
How did you get into this work? Like it's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, thanks. So I had an earlier life that was difficult. We talked about it before on your podcast another time. So let me know if you want to hear the story again.
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Well,
So
let's because you had a very, very, very interesting early life.
it was an interesting early life. And at the time, I didn't know really. I think when you're in the middle of something, it's hard to know just how maybe different that is to what other people might experience. But now also see how similar it is to what so many people have experienced. So I ran away from home at 15 years old, is my story. So I came from a great family, upper middle class. You would never imagine, like, great parents, just a great family. You would never imagine that happening to someone like me, and yet it just did. There was a series of things. We moved a couple of times. I didn't feel attached to anyone, any friends. My parents put my cat to sleep, which I thought was premature. Now I had this resentment towards them. One thing led to the other, and in a very short period of time, I went from just a normal kid to always having arguments with my parents. And one day I just said, I'm leaving. And I took, some clothes and a few things, stuffed it in a black garbage bag, and, like a hobo over my shoulder, I left my parents' house at 15 years old, which then set me on a track of a number of very difficult years of feeling alone in the world. Eventually feeling depression, because depression is like this chronic, being exposed to whatever that negativity or heaviness is for a chronic period of time. Now it's depression. And so I went into my 20s, finally did get my own apartment. I believe I was 21 years old. So now I wasn't kind of jumping from one stranger's house or one stranger's couch to the next, but I had my own place. So then I'm starting my adult life. I actually had a really good job too. So somehow managed to do quite well in school. I stayed in school, did very well actually, graduating top of my class, and landed a great job right out of school, and was very lucky in those ways. But I now had this residual, cloud hanging over me in my 20s, that it was like, a belief of, not knowing what my capabilities were, not really trusting my own potential, feeling like knocked down or even knocking myself down in a lot of ways energetically. And then, the 20s are hard for everybody. So
Yeah.
I had relationships that ended and a series of things like that, these disappointments, difficulty, struggling financially. While I had a great job, it wasn't like a hugely paying job. I was living paycheck to paycheck, living in an apartment, and so the struggles continued into my 20s until I did have depression. And I found myself one New Year's Eve alone. I had just broken up with someone who, we were going to get married. And instead of getting married, we broke up. And I was just, total rock bottom, you know, hated my job. It was a good job, but I was extremely unfulfilled in it. Felt very pigeonholed into the job, into the career. Um, the relationship just ended. So, and it might be this way for men too, but for women, I can say that when you date someone for a period of time, for me, it was 2 or 3 years, that relationship, you put all your eggs in one basket. And so when it doesn't work out, if it doesn't work out, a lot of women, as I did, have this feeling of, oh, I can't go through that again. I just invested a couple of years into this relationship. I thought this was the relationship that would lead to that stability that we all want, that I certainly wanted, to be loved unconditionally, that stability, to finally take a breath and say, oh, the project of finding someone is over. I have my person. This is a big deal to women. And so there's also this feeling of, am I ever going to find someone as good as that person? A lot of people experience that because you dated them because they were a great person. They were a good catch, let's say. And then for whatever reason, it didn't work out. So a lot of women have that feeling that, is that it? Is that it? Is there ever going to be, and it's hard to feel like you could start over again. And that age is an age of very narrow thinking, right? We can't really think that, one day I'm going to be 42 years old or whatever it is. I will be long past this and I'll be super happy in my life. It's very difficult to think that way in your 20s and even 30s, like early 30s. It's very difficult to look at the long term and that, it will get better. So I had this terrible, moment, actually, this night of total rock bottom on New Year's Eve, and was suicidal. Now, I contemplated suicide that night and thought of all the different ways in which I could do it, which really didn't seem like there was a good option. So, and I could go through what those were, but I'll I'll spare you that. But I did make it through that night. And in, the worst hour of that night, I sort of, looked up at the ceiling in my apartment and said, if I can just make it through this night, I'm going to figure this out. And then I'm going to tell everyone how I did it. And I was journaling. I was always a writer, so I was journaling, and I actually wrote that down. And I think I pulled myself through that night partly by writing and journaling. And so I just, I still have the journal where I wrote that.
Mm.
And so within a couple of weeks of that night, I quit my job. I packed up my clothes and my cat and my car, and that's all I had in the world. I cashed in the little bit of retirement savings that I had, which amounted to, I believe it was $4,000, not a lot, because you lose some when you cash them in.
Sure.
And I left my country, which was Canada, and moved to Nashville, Tennessee. And this was like with nothing. Well, Trey, when I got to Nashville, I had this opportunity because I had changed everything. I took a quantum leap. So not everybody needs to be so dramatic, but I did. I needed to quit my job. I needed to change. It was like death or change my life. And so I chose to change my life. And so everything had changed. I had this metaphorically new water in my pond instead of this stagnant closed pond. Now I had new water in my pond. The metaphor is energy. So now I'm exposed to new energy, new people, new career, everything was new. And I started meditating every day. So I went out into a forest every day just outside of Nashville and meditated. And one day I had an extraordinary experience.
Mm.
After doing this for many months, this one day I was meditating in the forest and I had been there for, let's say, 3 hours, and an energy shift happened. I started seeing the forest like it was sparkling, and it was iridescent and it was translucent, and the colors were like popping up in another dimension, beyond 3D, this other dimension. It was absolutely incredible. And then this chipmunk kind of walked past and walked right over my toe as I'm sitting there on the ground meditating. And I'm thinking, this is really strange. Like, it was like it didn't know I was there. And then this owl flew in and sat on a branch right in front of me. And I'm sitting on this cliff on this bit of an overhang. And this owl sits right there a few feet away and just stayed for however long we shared this space and time together. And I realized that, wow, the forest had accepted me, that my energy had become homeostasis, in harmony with the energy around me. So the larger concentration always wins, right? So the energy of the forest was able to dilute my energy of whatever that was, the hopped up from my life, all of the fears and dramas, all of that diluted to the point where I had become synchronized with the forest. And the forest knew that I was in harmony, therefore, that I could not hurt it, that I was in balance with what the forest already does perfectly, which is this wonderful natural balance. And in those moments, I experienced it. I saw the backstage of how energy works.
Mm.
And so I had my pen and paper and I'm writing down, and I wrote down the philosophy for viral energy. And that is this contagious nature of energy, that we have permeable energy fields, this being that is us. And I don't mean the skin or the physical body, but our energy being is permeable, semi permeable, so that we contribute to the energy around us and we take on energy from outside. And this became absolutely pivotal to me in my own journey, because for all of the self help books that I read, I had never heard this or understood this. And when I started applying it to my life, I mean, it was like everything took off. My career took off, the relationship that I wanted took off. I mean, everything from that moment forward changed because I started applying this concept of viral energy, and therefore what was I marinating in? And that truly is important, because as we take on those energies from outside of us, let's say they're the negative ones, the heavy ones, we can't just like get away with that. It has an effect on us. it brings us down. And you can think of these levels of consciousness. I have a good descriptor in my book, The Magic of Viral Energy, about these levels, 7 levels. And you can be brought down to a level where you're now in flow with all the stuff you don't want to be in flow with. Instead of the stuff you do want to be in flow with, you don't even have access to that at the lower levels because it's not there. It doesn't live there. It doesn't flow there. And so it matters to us what we take on energetically, because from this flow, this energy being that is you, that's what you're creating your life with. You
Hmm.
create your relationships with this energy, you create your work with this energy. It is absolutely imperative to your happiness and overall well-being.
Gosh, that's that's so amazing. So you go out into the wood. Well, there's so much. 15 years old, you run away from home.
Yeah.
You sleep on strangers' couches. You get through high school. Did you make it to college, or you just kind of did it on your own? Like you went
I
out
did
into
it
the
on my own later in life.
okay.
Yeah, I had to go back when I was working full time. I then went to university at night.
That's awesome. And then eventually you move down to Nashville. You get out into the mother nature. You get out into the woods and you feel her consciousness. You feel that,
Yeah.
and then you become into homeostasis, as you put it. Did you realize that that was what's going on at the time? Like, or are you just
Yep.
kind of like feeling like, man, there's something here that is greater than myself, and I'm seeing the backstage past the higher nature consciousness, and it's like you say you get this insight, and now you have this idea of what it is, and you have this philosophy. You start this philosophy of it, like that is obtaining higher levels of consciousness. That is putting
Yeah.
yourself in that zone, that flow state to receive. I never knew that. Like I never thought about that. I always thought that there was always this, one that I wasn't smart enough or I wasn't able to do this. But it's like putting yourself in these situations that you can achieve flow states. But it's also like the universe is like leaving you breadcrumbs along your journey and allowing you to like make decisions. That's what the free will is, and saying, all right, Trey, I'm going to give you this breadcrumb. You're going to have the opportunity to meet people. You're going to have an opportunity to learn more. It's what your decision is how you're going to achieve the next level of consciousness. And for you, that breadcrumb was obviously you had to go to Nashville, and now you go into this new energy vortex, and now you're receiving insight. For some, it's not that insane. Some of
Hmm.
us, it's like just going for a walk out in nature, making that decision, going out, and then just feeling it. Like today, I went for a walk out in nature, and you can just feel you can just feel the consciousness of it all. You can see the life around us. We're in spring now, so birth of new life, and you can feel it, and you know that you're a part of it because your body. I mean, at
Hmm.
the molecular level, our cells are doing the same thing that the universe is doing, right? Like it sheds, it dies, it rebirths, it mutates, it changes, it combines itself with other things, and like we are small universes inside of this body, this
Yep.
membrane that you
Macro and the
discussed.
micro.
Yeah, and
And anybody can experience that. That's true. You can meditate in nature. That's just a great environment because it's this wonderful concentration. But you can do it on the beach. You can do different things. You can create an environment, maybe a space inside your home, even in an apartment. So you can do, anybody can do that. My particular experience was just that I was at that fork in the road of, do I continue doing the same old crap that I had been doing for years that wasn't working? Or do I change? Now, it was a hard thing to do, right? Like taking that change, like the comfort zone is a really nice little nook.
mhm,
you know, I had a good job. I was actually in public relations. So I was I was always in the newspaper. I was sort of like the face of the company. I was like, there was some prestige to this job, even though it just paid okay. It was a good job. And I was just unfulfilled because my soul knew there was more. And yet I stayed in that for too long.
mhm,
I stayed there past my growth period. And so for me, it might be okay for the next person, but for me, I wanted more. And I also, I had been in that relationship longer than I should have. I
yeah,
wanted to get married. He really didn't, and so I didn't know my own worth at the time. And also, I didn't know that it would be okay if I made those changes. So to make the change is a very hard part. But once you do that, if that's what you should do, if that's what's right for you, if that's what you choose, you then have to actually physically do it. And oftentimes I find that when you do that, when it's the right thing for you, when you go ahead and take that action, even when you're afraid and it's terrifying, because it often is, and you do it anyway, even when you're afraid, the rewards are extraordinary. I mean, the rewards are, for me, it really did. I knew what happened that day. You asked, was it like, was I aware of this, massive shift, or was it just something that kind of worked on me? It was both. I was absolutely aware of, wow. I had read all kinds of books, all the self help, personal development, spirituality, everything from, I mean, you name it, you name the author or the law of attraction material, um, channeled material, you name it, I read it. Law of attraction, I have since found out there's sort of something that people are misinterpreting with law of attraction, almost like a missing link. And that is the so law of attraction is like how a radio works. So like attracts like. We know that. We've all read, and seen quite a few documentaries on law of attraction. But oftentimes we're not able to like manifest this. We're doing all this stuff. We're doing the vision boards. And I was doing all of that and still depressed and suicidal. I had the vision board on the ceiling, the vision board on my mirror. Like I was working hard, to turn my life around. So it was not a lack of doing. It wasn't a lack of work. It was a lack of knowing the key, and the key was that attraction is only part of it. And the other part is actually viral energy. So attraction is like you're sitting there going, if I put out a certain emotion into this world, this is a vibration, a frequency, I'm going to get it back because, like a radio will send out from the tower a certain frequency. It is only picked up by the radio stations, the receivers that are on the exact same frequency. Can't work any other way. Tune to a different radio station, you get a different program. So you have to be, the transmitter and the receiver have to be tuned. So I think we all get that with law of attraction. So we're thinking like, put out happy thoughts, put out positive emotions. Well, what if you're not? What if you're going through a divorce? What if you're going through a difficulty in your life? So now are you scared that, uh-oh,
Hmm.
what am I attracting through the law of attraction? Because it just is. I'm, having a tough time at work. I've got issues with my coworkers, whatever that is for you. And so now you're adding a layer of fear to, got to think positive, got to think positive, but that's not how it works. There's actually a large piece of it has to do with viral energy. That's contagious energy. And that is, what are you allowing into your energy field without putting up whatever, force field that you need to, like, deflector shields up, with just unconsciously and mindlessly letting in negativities in our environment that could be on the news. How can you ever, rise to the epitome of your abilities and achievements when you are, putting yourself through these things quite mindlessly? So there's many layers to understanding viral energy. But when I did understand it, I mean, that was it. It was just like gears that were sort of clashing. And one day they just went click. And the whole thing, all the other pieces, the law of attraction, everything I read now made sense. And it was now finally functional.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's everything. It's so funny, this conversation, because like this last past week, I have been just everything we're hitting on. I've had thoughts or insight on this entire week, because I was listening to Abraham, um,
Yeah.
and she was talk or he or they or however you want to put that.
Spirit group, they,
Yeah,
channeled
yeah.
by Esther Hicks. Yes.
Esther Hicks was talking about the things that you say to yourself that put
Mhm.
this vibration out. Like, all right, money flows easily to me, right? You say that, you make that statement, but if you don't believe it, that's the emotion, right? Like if I say, um, great guests flow to me easily, but if I don't believe that, if I back that up and say, I don't know what. Why would I say that? It's not true. If you have that doubt, if you have that moment of hesitancy, it's not going to happen. You're not going to send out that rocket ship of desire because you're doubting yourself and you're not fully believing that, right?
So I'm going to blow your mind, okay, Trey? So I'm going to draw a little picture. So I'll describe it for anyone who's just listening by audio, and it's super simple. So your example is now all of these things are true. So what the spirit group Abraham is saying is true. So you say to yourself, money flows easily to me, or great guests flow easily to me, whatever that is. So here's a little diagram of different flows, okay?
Hmm.
So we're doing these flows are stacked horizontally, one on top of the next. You can think of like a layered cake where you have different layers of the cake, and each of those layers is a flow. So in this flow, you have various things, and in this next flow, the layer above, you have various things and experiences and emotions and people and contacts. And in this flow above that, you have various things. Well, these flows are separate, right? Just like a layer cake, they're separate layers. So when Abraham says, money flows easily to me, here's Trey. Trey's right here. And you're in this, somewhere in this middle flow, and you're in there. But all the money that you want and all the good guests that you want might be up here in the flow above that. So here they are now. They would flow easily if you were in this flow, but unfortunately, you're in this flow. whoever you are. Now I know that's not you, Trey, because you do have great guests.
Give me
If
some
I
of that
do
money
say so
though. That
myself.
money would be great.
But so maybe all the money is up here. Now, where those flows, this is where the catch is, and this is where it's so important and so awesome. So that vibration that is you, your presence, your beingness, your quantum. So that quantum is a measurement of energy that is you. So we're going to call it the quantum or the presence. That is affected by these viral energies in your environment. So as you knock down your own personal power, your own quantum, to knock down or level up to higher levels, you change the flow that you're in.
Mm.
So, over a chronic period of time with exposure to various environmental influences, that could be the people you're hanging out with, that could be, what you're exposing yourself to, that could be self talk, that could be too much negativity in the news, whatever that is in your life, can either level you down or level you up. So, you have a responsibility with choice and intention, and intention affects your presence, your energy quantum. It's actually very impactful. So this is something you can do for yourself. But in general, the concept is that you can level up or you can level down in your quantum, that measurement of energy that is your beingness. And as you do that, let's say as you level up, you're now in the flow of the money, the connections, the resources, and you can just put your hand out like this and grab them because they're all flowing by. It's actually not that difficult. But if you're struggling and there's something that you're just not like, it's just not quite, well, there are different levels, and it doesn't have to be that you're at the very top of it, because that is, what the experience is of our development and raising our consciousness. And I can see that you're on a rapid pace right now as you're at, kind of looking at new wisdom sources, and you're opening portals of your consciousness and accessing ideas that you hadn't thought of before. And so you are, through all of that, raising this vibration that is you. And I bet you're also experiencing that experience of just being able to reach out and grab those things
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you are in flow with it. So when Abraham or other, fantastic wisdom sources and teachers say, you know, um, what was this? What did they say? I am in flow with money. Was that it?
Money flows easily to me.
Money flows easily to me. Well, money is flowing. I guarantee you money is flowing. And whatever that resource is, it is flowing. The question is, where is it flowing? And are you there in the
Hmm.
same flow?
How do you raise your vibration? How do you level up?
Many different ways. So the the levels are not things that kind of come and go, like one day you're at this level, the very next day you're at another level. That would be emotions, and emotions do that. They come and go. You can have bad days, you can have good days, but the level in which your consciousness is vibrating is something that is achieved over a chronic period of time. So it's not exactly like that, although it's possible that you can have an experience that's, a very rapid quantum leap. But in general, it's something that is, it's a level of consciousness that is achieved, it's earned. So it's earned through choice. So choice and intention, I would say, would answer the question that you've asked. How do I do it? So intention is the most powerful force in the universe because intention leads to thought, thought leads to words and actions, and so on, like this. So, intention is this foundation that you know who you are as a person, you know what you stand for. Think of this example, someone that, let's say there's a couple that's married and they haven't yet made like a deliberate choice of, are they people who are loyal to their partner? Do they cheat on their spouse or do they not? Like, this is intention, right? But don't wait until you're in a bar and you've had a couple of drinks to decide where you stand on this issue. You set a fundamental intention somewhere earlier on in the relationship, let's hope, where you've basically made this baseline thing that it doesn't matter what happens with a coworker at work or, one, evening at a bar, because you have long ago made an intention. So it becomes not possible for you. There's no choice involved in the moment because you've already made that choice through intention. Well, you could take that same example to anything. You could say, my intention is to spread love in this world, and that everything I do in all future choices are going to be born from that. Or my intention for some people is to be very successful in their career, to make lots of money, because, to each his own, right? No judgment on that. But for some people, that is their baseline intention. And all choices and decisions after that get made through that lens. So intention is absolutely everything. So the best thing that any of us can do, that I do, is it starts with that. Fundamentally, what is my life about? Fundamentally, what do I want to create in this world? So not what I want from this life or what I want to do in this life, like a job or, any kind of doing, but what do I want to create? And it always stems from creation. So creation is exponential. Creation creates more creation. So if you want to be successful, you want to be rich, create. Whatever that is, create. It's not going to happen just because you want something. It's going to happen because you're creating something, whatever that something is. So I would say that for me, those baseline intentions, fundamentally, what is my life about? What do I create in this world? Those are the things that have determined, for the most part, that vibration in which I am in flow with. And I know it's a great place because you can tell by what you're experiencing. What are those resources that come easily to you? What do you experience in your everyday life? It was years ago that my life was total hell. I have gone through different stages. I know what they are like um, intimately. I know what that's like, and I remember it well. And I also know what this is like. And so I know that I'm in the flow. And so, small daily things, of course, meditation is a fantastic modality. Sharing oneself with others is part of creation and collaboration. So, being on your podcast, for example, so now we're taking what could have been a stagnant pond of you, your energy field, and you're opening it to, now I've got Trey's audience and we're sharing ideas and we're sharing energy and we're creating something and somebody's listening and it's making a difference in somebody's life because our intention is to spread love. And so, just in that collaboration, we're renewing our pond, we're circulating this resource. All resources must circulate or they will stagnate. Blood has to circulate. Money, it's got to move around or it stagnates. It becomes less over time unless it's in the system, in the marketplace. Water in a pond's got to circulate. Even the universe circulates. So, circulation is another principle of life. And so, I would say that the things I do are I look at my intentions, I stay on track with that, make decisions from that. And then I connect with like minded people and attempt to circulate this energy resource in the world.
Beautiful, beautifully said. Um, how was the book? Like, I feel like what's awesome too is like what you're talking about creating, co-creating. I feel like things like books are just these balls of energy that are sent out into the universe that people pick up that are attracted to, and it evolves them. Like everything that I read is like I'm directly being affected by that author's energy when they created that book. I don't know if that is something that you deal with or that is a thing, but I feel
It
like
is.
every podcast episode that I do, we create energy, we put it out into the universe. Every piece of content you create, books, is a piece of energy that is a part of you, that is from the universe, and is sending it out, and you're helping create more of it through people and through followers. I'm all about your work. I think it's great. I think more people need to be aware of that because let's face it, look at the world we live in, right? Like, I mean, a lot of that heaviness that you were talking about, this is everywhere, right? Like, I just feel like this would awaken a lot of people and allow people to be change agents for their own lives.
Absolutely. This is it. I mean, this is a form of empowerment, is to, look at the wisdom of others, but to also know that those wisdom sources are not exclusive to that author. I mean, this is that opening of consciousness. This is that magic that happens when you tap into that greater flow, to know that there is a universal consciousness there. There is a network there that is of a purer, more concentrated, pure consciousness that is available to us. And there are so many ways we can tap into it. And we can tap into that through the work of other people, their books, their wisdoms that are often, channeled in ways, even if they don't know that they were channeled works of art. They're, a lot of times coming from a source that seems outside of your own knowledge base. And so they're great, but it's what will find you at the right time. It's really interesting that we're in these symbiotic relationships. All of life is in symbiotic relationships with each other. I have a colleague through the Viral Energy Institute who was telling me this phenomena that she and her group is working on. And that is, this is just amazing, Trey. So listen to this. So people that have certain physiological diseases, different diseases or ailments of the body, different weeds and herbs will pop up in their yard that specifically can treat the particular disease or ailment that they have. And it's something that can be studied and has been studied. So you could have different, vegetation, natural herbs, and, weeds that are used in different ways, like a natural remedy, pop up in this person's yard, different to this person's yard based on their diseases. Here's another example. So this colleague of mine works with wolves. She's an animal communicator and specifically works with wolves. And she has lived with wolves at various times in her life, which is basically like, instead of having a pet dog, she has a pet wolf. So she says that at the times in which she has had a wolf in her home, living with her on her property, that deer will show up that have never been there before. So this is a wolf that's well fed, not even remotely interested in deer. So it didn't call it in through its own attraction, right? Because it's not looking for it, doesn't need it, has other sources of food. But somehow, when she has wolves, the deer show up. And the reason is they're in a symbiotic relationship.
Hmm.
So even though the wolves aren't calling them in through need or attraction, they are there because that's the deal. That's the deal. So, what is it that you are in a symbiotic relationship with? What is the deal for you? And sometimes that is the material, the books, the people that you are meeting, the people that you're connecting with, because there is a level of consciousness that knows what deals you made, what deals your soul made before even incarnating in this lifetime. And they will show up for you specifically, different to your neighbor, different to the next person, because that was the deal.
Penelope, you crush it every time you come on here. Um, I promise you that.
It's our energy.
How can people find out more about you?
Yes, go to my website, which is just my name, PenelopeJeanHayes.com.
Mm. Where do you want to go? Like, what is your dream? Like, what is your mission? Like, what is it at the end of the day when you sit back, you're working tirelessly for?
So I'm further building the Viral Energy Institute, and I'm looking to do more courses that will be helpful to people, in person retreats when the world opens back up. And the vision is, my husband and I just 5 months ago bought this beautiful property with a couple of acres, and we're building out this gorgeous Zen space for the Institute. So that is a dream. And ultimately, the dream for me, and this is where it started a long time ago, and this is going to circle back to where you and I started when we talked just a minute in the green room before starting this podcast. And you told me your great interest in helping children that are in peril.
Hmm.
And my particular soul's interest is animals that are in peril, that are being abused in our food system, that are being abused in other ways. That's a deep passion for me. So when I started this work, and even before that day of meditating in the forest, since my teenage years, I had this thing for I got to help animals. I got to somehow do something to stop animal abuse. And I'll make this a very short story because I know we're running out of time, but I had through many experiences, which included trying to change laws for abusers of animals, that actually, yeah, it kind of didn't work because nobody really changes. They'll just go to jail. They still do what they do. I discovered that in raising consciousness is how we're going to heal the world.
Hmm.
So, in raising the consciousness of people, so not even directly looking to help the animals or, in the next person's case, the children, but to look to how can I raise consciousness? What contribution can I make to raising consciousness? Because when you raise consciousness of a population or an individual, you're now operating from a level that's incapable of harming another, incapable of abusing an animal, abusing a child, abandoning a child on the street, incapable of warring within our own families or within countries. We get to that level of consciousness, just like nature operates perfectly, and I was not able to be harmed to the nature that day when I was meditating in the forest. That's a raising of consciousness. So when we do that, and if that is the goal, if that is the goal of the work that I do every day, at the end of the day, that's the answer to your question. I want the legacy to be that she helped raise consciousness.
I love it. We're definitely doing that together today. Penelope, thank
Yeah.
you so much for joining the show. You're always going to be welcome. You're always going to be able to come on the show whenever you want. Open invitation never expires. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trey.